I still think about that weekend. Jamie and I had been planning it for weeks. A quiet escape to the Pacific Northwest, just the two of us, away from the noise of our lives. We weren't a couple, just friends who'd known each other since college, but people always assumed. I guess we were that close. The trail we picked was supposed to be peaceful, a 4-mile loop that wound through dense forest and ended at a secluded campsite by a misty lake. It was the kind of place that felt forgotten, like the world had moved on without it. That should have been my first warning. We drove up on a Friday afternoon, the sky heavy with clouds that hung low over the trees. By the time we parked at the trailhead, a thick fog had settled in, curling around the trunks like it was alive. I remember stepping out of the car and feeling the damp air cling to my skin. Jamie grabbed the map, squinting at it through the mist, and pointed toward the path. It wasn't far, they said, their voice muffled by the hood of their jacket. I nodded, though something about the stillness made me uneasy. It was too quiet, even for the woods. As we hiked, the fog only grew thicker, swallowing the trail behind us. We didn't talk much. Jamie was focused on the map, and I was lost in my thoughts, trying to shake the feeling that we weren't alone. About halfway up, we stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. It was just off the trail, half hidden by the underbrush, but the gear was still there. A tent sagging under the weight of fallen branches, a backpack torn open, its contents scattered. A single boot lay on its side, like someone had kicked it off in a hurry. Jamie crouched down, picking up a water bottle still half full. "Weird," they muttered. "Looks like they left in a rush." I glanced around, the hairs on my neck prickling. Maybe they got spooked by something. Jamie shrugged, but I could tell they felt it too. The sense that something wasn't right. We moved on, faster now, eager to reach the lake. When we finally arrived, the campsite was empty, just as we'd hoped. The lake stretched out before us, its surface glassy and still, reflecting the grey sky. We set up our tent near the water's edge. The fog so thick I could barely see the other side. It felt like we were the only people in the world. That is, until we weren't. It was late afternoon when I first saw them. 2 figures emerging from the mist, walking along the shoreline. They were dressed in hiking gear, but something about them felt off. Too clean, maybe, like they hadn't been out here long. Jamie waved, and they approached, their faces breaking into smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. They were loud when they greeted us, their voices cutting through the quiet in a way that felt wrong. They said they'd been camping nearby for a couple of days, pointing vaguely toward the trees. I looked, but the fog hid everything. Jamie asked if they'd seen anyone else, mentioning the abandoned camp we'd passed. Their smiles slipped just for a moment, before they brushed it off. Then they turned and vanished back into the mist. Jamie didn't seem bothered, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The way they'd looked at us, like they were sizing us up, it made my skin crawl. We spent the evening by the fire, the flames struggling against the damp air, and tried to relax. But every snap of a twig, every rustle in the bushes, had me glancing over my shoulder. Jamie teased me for being paranoid, but I noticed they kept looking toward the trees too. Night fell, and with it came the fog, thicker than before, pressing in on all sides. We crawled into the tent, zipping it up tight, though I knew it wouldn't keep out whatever was out there. I lay awake for what felt like hours, listening to the silence until I couldn't take it anymore. I had to pee, but the thought of going out into that soupy darkness made my stomach turn. Still, I couldn't hold it. I grabbed my headlamp and slipped out, the beam cutting a weak path through the fog. That's when I heard it, voices low and muffled, coming from somewhere near the lake. I froze, straining to make out the words, but they were too far away. My heart pounded as I scanned the shoreline, the light shaking in my hand. Then I saw them. 2 figures standing by the water, their backs to me, motionless. I couldn't tell if they were talking or just waiting. A chill ran down my spine, and I backed away slowly, praying they hadn't seen me. I practically dove back into the tent, shaking Jamie awake. "There's someone out there," I whispered, my voice trembling. Jamie sat up, groggy but alert, and peered through the mesh window. The figures were still there, closer now, just beyond the edge of our camp. They weren't moving, weren't speaking, just standing, watching. Jamie's face went pale. "We need to go," they said, already stuffing our things into the bags. I didn't argue. We packed in a frantic silence, every sound amplified by the fog. When we finally stepped out, the figures were gone, swallowed by the mist. But I could feel them, lurking just out of sight. We grabbed our packs and ran, the trail a blur beneath our feet. The fog was so thick I could barely see Jamie in front of me, and more than once I thought I heard footsteps behind us, heavy, deliberate, like someone was following. We didn't stop until we reached the car, breathless and soaked in sweat. The parking lot was empty, the abandoned campsite still there, untouched. I drove us straight to the nearest town, where we found a 24-hour diner and called the police. They took our statement, but I could tell they didn't believe us. "Probably just other campers," the officer said, shrugging. "People get weird out there sometimes." It wasn't until a week later that I saw the news. 3 hikers had gone missing in that same area over the past month. Their campsites found abandoned, gear left behind. The police had no leads, no suspects, just a string of disappearances that no one could explain. I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence, that the men we'd seen had nothing to do with it. But deep down, I knew better. Jamie doesn't talk about it anymore, and neither do I. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I think about those figures in the fog, standing by the lake, watching us, and I wonder how close we came to being another headline, another mystery lost to the woods. I still think about that day more than I'd like to admit. It was one of those crisp autumn mornings in Oregon, the kind where the air feels like it's waking you up with every breath. I just wrapped up a photography job a day early, capturing shots of the coast for some travel magazine, and found myself with a rare free day before my flight. I'd always wanted to explore the Cascade Mountains, so I figured, why not? The trail I picked was supposed to be a 6-hour loop, perfect for getting lost in the fall colors and maybe snapping a few shots for myself. I remember feeling this sense of freedom as I started out. My work keeps me moving constantly, but it's always airports and hotels, never the kind of places that let you breathe. That morning, with the forest stretching out around me, I finally felt like I could. The leaves were a riot of reds and golds, and the only sound was the crunch of my boots on the path. It was peaceful. At least, it was at first. About an hour in, I saw him. He was sitting off to the side of the trail, half hidden by the trees. Older guy, maybe in his 50s, with a grizzled beard and clothes that looked like they'd seen better days. His eyes were sharp though, too sharp. As I passed, he looked up and stared at me, unblinking. I forced a polite smile, the kind you give strangers when you're trying not to seem rude, but he didn't smile back. He just watched me go. I tried to shake it off, telling myself he was probably just some local out for a walk, but I couldn't help glancing back every few minutes. The trail was empty behind me, but the feeling of being watched stuck. I kept going, trying to focus on the scenery. The mountains were beautiful. The air smelled like pine and earth, and I even stopped to take a few photos of the way the light filtered through the trees. But that uneasy feeling never quite left. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, always there in the back of my mind. After a couple of hours, I found a nice spot to rest, a fallen log near a small clearing. I sat down, pulled out an apple from my bag, and took a bite, savoring the quiet. That's when I saw him again. He was walking toward me, his pace steady, deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was hiking the same loop. But the way he looked at me said otherwise. He stopped right in front of me, close enough that I could see the dirt under his fingernails, and without a word, he held out a photograph. "You dropped this," he said, his voice like gravel. I took it, more out of reflex than anything. It was a picture of me, standing on the trail, smiling at the camera, with the same trees and mountains in the background. I recognized the spot. I'd been there just an hour earlier, but I hadn't taken any self-portraits. I hadn't seen anyone else on the trail. My stomach twisted. "This isn't mine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't drop this." "Yes, it is," he insisted, his eyes narrowing. "You dropped it. Take it." I didn't know what to say. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Had he been following me, taking pictures without me knowing? Or was this some kind of sick joke? I could feel his gaze boring into me, waiting for a reaction. I muttered a quick thanks and stuffed the photo into my bag, desperate to get away. He didn't move, just stood there watching as I slung my backpack over my shoulder and hurried down the path. I decided right then to cut the hike short. The trail didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like a trap. The trees seemed taller, the shadows deeper, and every rustle in the bushes made me jump. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see him trailing behind me, but the path stayed empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was there, just out of sight. By the time I made it back to the parking area, the sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows across the gravel lot. My car was the only one there parked facing the trailhead. I was maybe 10 feet away when I saw him, standing next to the driver's side door, his hands in his pockets, waiting. My breath caught in my throat. He hadn't followed me. He'd gone ahead. I froze, my mind scrambling for a plan. If I ran, he'd probably chase me. If I confronted him, who knows what he'd do. Then I remembered my keys. I slipped my hand into my pocket, feeling for the familiar shape, and took a slow step toward the passenger side. He didn't move at first, just watched me with that same unblinking stare. I unlocked the door as quietly as I could, and in one quick motion, I yanked it open and dove inside. That's when he lunged. He sprinted around the car, reaching for the driver's side handle just as I hit the lock button. He yanked at the door, his face twisted with anger, and started banging on the window. "Give it back," he yelled, his voice muffled through the glass. "It's mine." I didn't wait to figure out what he meant. I scrambled over the console, jammed the key into the ignition, and floored the gas. The car lurched backward, kicking up gravel, and I could see him in the rearview mirror, standing there, fists clenched, watching me go. I didn't stop until I hit the main road, my hands shaking on the wheel. There was a small town, about 20 minutes away, and I remembered passing a police station on my way in. I went straight there, still rattled, and told them everything. The officer took the photo and my statement, but I could tell he didn't think much of it. Probably figured it was just some weird hiker with too much time on his hands. He said they'd look into it, but I never heard anything more. That night, back at the hotel, I called my friend Sarah. I needed to tell someone, to make sense of it. It was like something out of a nightmare, I said, my voice still shaky. I don't think I'll ever feel safe hiking alone again. And I don't. That day changed me. Now, I always bring a friend, and I make sure someone knows where I am. I still love the woods, but I can't shake the memory of that man's eyes, or the photo he took without me knowing. Sometimes, when I'm out there, I still feel like someone's watching, just out of sight, waiting. It was late October last year, the perfect time for a hike, cool enough to enjoy the walk, warm enough to linger outside. I used to hike with friends all the time, but their chaotic work schedules made group trips rare. So, I'd gotten used to shorter solo outings, savoring the solitude. That weekend, I had a couple of days free and decided to revisit a trail I'd done once before. A rugged coastal path along cliffs overlooking the ocean. It was a day-and-a-half loop, remote and wild, exactly what I needed to clear my head. I drove out early Saturday, parking in a windswept lot near the trailhead. The first stretch was open and breathtaking. Cliffs dropping into churning waves, the salty air sharp in my lungs. I'm a photographer by hobby, so I brought my camera, planning to capture the moody autumn light. The path soon dipped into a stretch of low, twisted trees, their branches bent by years of wind. By midday, I was deep into the trail, the ocean's roar a constant companion. That's when I saw him, a man up ahead, walking toward me. At first, I couldn't tell which way he was going, but as I kept moving, it was clear he was headed my way. This trail wasn't popular. I'd barely seen anyone last time. It was the weekend though, so I brushed it off. Still, something felt strange as he got closer. He wasn't carrying anything, no bag, no water, nothing. I was hours in, miles from the nearest road. Who walks that far without gear? He raised a hand as he approached, and I nodded back, keeping my distance. The wind swallowed most sounds, but I caught his voice as he passed, a low, casual tone. "Nice camera. Where you headed with that?" It wasn't threatening, but it prickled my nerves. Why did he care? I gripped the strap tighter and said, "Just up the trail a bit," keeping it vague. He smiled, a little too wide, and said, "Hope you get a good shot," before walking on. I glanced back after a few steps. He'd stopped, standing there watching me. My stomach twisted. I picked up my pace, the crash of waves drowning out any chance of hearing if he followed. For hours I couldn't shake him from my mind. That comment about my camera, the way he'd lingered, it gnawed at me. What was he doing out here, empty-handed? As the sun dipped low, painting the sky orange, I decided to camp. Normally, I'd pitch right on the path, but that encounter left me uneasy. I found a sheltered spot a quarter-mile off trail, tucked behind some rocks and scrubby trees. The wind howled as I set up my tent, and I tried to relax, eating a sandwich I'd packed. But my thoughts kept circling back to him. I crawled into my tent early, the ocean's rumble lulling me toward sleep. Then, sometime deep in the night, I heard it, footsteps. Not the wind or waves, but a slow, heavy crunch in the dirt coming from behind the rocks. I bolted awake, breath shallow, straining to listen. They weren't random like an animal's. They had purpose, pausing every few steps. I pictured him out there, that weird smile, my camera in his hands. They stopped maybe 10 feet away, and silence took over. Thick, suffocating silence. I didn't move, didn't dare. My heart hammered as I waited, praying it was nothing. Hours dragged by, the darkness pressing in. When the first grey light filtered through the tent, I had to act. I unzipped it slowly, peering out. The coast was still, the waves crashing far below. No one in sight. I stepped out, scanning the ground, and froze. There, in the dirt near the rocks, were boot prints. Fresh, deep, circling where I'd slept. Panic hit hard. I tore down my tent, hands trembling, every gust of wind making me flinch. I didn't care about photos anymore. I just needed out. Slinging my bag over my shoulder, I bolted back to the trail, choosing the shorter return route. Every shadow felt like him, every sound a step behind me. The hike back was endless, but I didn't stop until I reached my car at dusk, locking the doors and peeling out of there. Later, I told my friends. They said I'd dodged something bad, maybe worse than I realized. I reported it to the police, but with no proof beyond my story, it went nowhere. Now, I stick to group hikes. That trail, those prints, that man, they're burned into me. I still wonder what he wanted, and I hope I never find out.